Thank y'all for coming. I'm Karen Korb, chair of Persistence PAC, and we really appreciate y'all coming out. We've got a treat for you tonight, a couple of treats for you tonight, actually. We're going to start with this panel up here, and I want to introduce the person that's going to moderate it, somebody that I'm very, very big fan of. She was the first African-American woman to win county commissioner in Huntsville 3 years ago, and in District 6. She has been quite the go-getter since she's been in office, and I've got big dreams for her. I'm telling you, I think she's going to go far. Violet Edwards.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Oh, it is good to hear y'all. I can't see a thing. Good to hear y'all here this evening. As Ms. Karen said, I am Violet Edwards. I have the honor and the privilege of representing District 6 here in Madison County, and we are going to have some fun here tonight. You are not here by accident. I just want to stress that to you. Now, earlier today, I was a little stressed because it was raining, and I go to bed when it rains. And I was worried that you wouldn't come out because it was raining. So, but you're not here by accident, because we are here to plant a seed for some people. And it is our goal or our mission that when you leave here, that seed is planted, and it will go forth and it will just bring great fruit. And then for others, you are a seed and you're in a drought. It's not growing, you're tired. And so for you, we're just hoping that you will be re-energized, that you will find that hope, that you will see that there are other like-minded people in this community just like you, and together we can make, just a small ripple, we can just make a big wave, a tidal wave, and make some change in this community. So I'm glad to see all of you here tonight. It's brought to you by Persistence PAC, our Persistence PAC board. We have any board members that can stand up and be recognized? Board members, this group is right here. They have worked so hard, or I say we have worked so hard. I joined the board about 3 years ago. It has been a wonderful experience. They're doing great things. We are doing great things. The mission of Persistence PAC is we're an organization that we are committed to supporting high quality, value-driven, progressive candidates all across the state of Alabama on all levels of government by investing in and supporting their campaigns to be elected into office. That is a huge commitment. Anybody in here ever thought about running for office? Right there. What's your name?
Hello everybody, my name is Leah Nelson. I'm a sophomore urban planning student at the Alabama A&M University. And I always dream of being a politician or a Democratic Party representative of any sort.
Well, welcome. So that's what we're talking about. That's the seed that we're here to plant and to water. And I don't know what you just heard, but I think she just announced that she's running for county commission in 2 years. Any seat except for District 6, okay? I got you. But that is why we're here today. Running for office is not easy. It's a task and it's difficult. And in 2022, in the 2022 election cycle, Persistence PAC supported several high-quality, value-driven, progressive candidates. And we had some wins and we had some lessons. And tonight we've pulled together an amazing panel that's going to discuss some of those lessons with you, and then we'll get to Mr. John. So first, let me introduce our panel. First, we have Stephanie Manning. Ms. Manning is a social worker and a former political candidate from Limestone County. She serves on the executive board of the National Association of Social Workers, where she is the legislative chairperson and the president-elect of the Alabama chapter. Her current goal is to become more involved in local activism and bring more social workers into the field of progressive politics. Welcome, Ms. Manning. Our second panelist is Kim Rucker. Now, Ms. Rucker, come on out. Is an attorney and a former candidate for Madison County Judge. She holds degrees from Alabama State University and the University of Alabama Law School. She currently serves as treasurer for the Madison County Democratic Women. Now, future Judge Rucker, y'all heard me say that right? Okay. Future Judge Rucker has trial experience in district and circuit court, and when she she makes it to the bench, she will make sure that every person's rights are protected and justice is always served. Ms. Roy. Next we have Andrea Alvarez. Recently elected to serve on the board of the Huntsville City Schools, representing District 3. She is a proud product of Huntsville City Schools and served 4 years as the PTA president of her children's elementary. Now, once the Huntsville Council of PTAs realized that she was not going home, nor did she ever sleep, they awarded her with Volunteer of the Year. So again, Representative Alvarez. And last but certainly not least, we have Ms. April Hodges. Ms. Hodges is a graduate of the University of Alabama in business and social work. She joined the staff of Alabama Senator Doug Jones in 2018 in Washington, D.C., focusing on immigration and child welfare policies. In 2019, she moved back to Alabama to serve as Senator Jones's North Alabama political director and field representatives. Now, this is where I was going to put a joke about April, but I'm low-key scared of her. She has a really thick phone book, or Rolodex, and so I need to say her friend. But currently, she operates Red Clay Strategies, a political consulting firm that supports candidates pursuing office. Ms. Hodges. So again, our goal is to take some of the lessons learned from the 2022 cycle and put them in the community for everyone to know. So ladies, are we ready? Ready. We're going to start out with Ms. Manning. And my first question is, so just to let you know a little bit about Ms. Stephanie, if she had won her seat, she would have been the only woman and the only Democrat and the youngest person to ever serve on the Limestone County Commission. We need candidates like Ms. Manning in Limestone County. And I just wanted to say that out loud because I'm putting it all in the air tonight, okay? So what did you find is the biggest hurdle or barrier when you were running for office, and what do you think some of the solutions are? And did your age, being in the Gen Z generation, did that help or hurt? How did you navigate that?
Let me figure out.
You're on, no, you're
I'm
on.
on, okay. So I think the two biggest hurdles I encountered when running for office were money and time. And I think all of these ladies can attest to that. Money, I mean, I'm so grateful for organizations like Persistence PAC. I can honestly say that without Persistence PAC, I wouldn't have gotten the votes that I did. So thank you to Persistence PAC. And so that's a potential solution, is to have more organizations and more Democratic donors, to recruit those donors and to really incentivize them with and educate them on why it's important to have progressive candidates in office. And then time, I work 40 hours a week. I'm a social worker, as Violet said, and it's very, very hard to balance, especially as a young person, work with the campaign. So, volunteering is a way to solve that issue. Having more volunteers, having more hands in the campaign would really help that issue a lot. To the young lady who says she wants to run for office, get your network, because you need that network and you need as many people as possible to know you and to want to help you. And I think as a young person, I think that helped me out a lot because it was a refreshing face to the community. They were typically used to a bunch of older white men who didn't really connect with them. So the community really embraced me, I think, as a woman and as a young person. But I also think that it was also a barrier in that some people couldn't take me seriously and thought I was not up to the challenge of being commissioner.
I know about that. Thank you so much for that answer. And she touched on something that we all know too well. There are a lot of agencies here that are doing a lot of great things. And so I'm going to address this next question to Hammer Hodges. No, to Ms. Hodges. And it's a question about the different organizations. There are so many clubs here in Madison County that are doing similar missions and have similar visions for our future. How can we better collaborate? How can we use the power of the collective, still doing what we do, to make further progress and to reach our goals?
Yes. So it's about communication. We have so many organizations. Persistence PAC does their part. They raised so much money this last cycle, and they went to all of our candidates. We have other organizations who work on voter engagement. We have organizations working on voter education. And so I think the key to bringing all of those resources together is really a coordinated campaign. People who've worked on a campaign, they know it's coordinated with your local party and local organizations. I think in Madison County, we have lacked that in many years. And so I think the key is communication. We need strategic plans for each of those organizations, and then one large strategic plan for all of those strategic plans to fall into one larger one with that mission of getting Democrats elected. But I think the key is really coordination between, we can all meet once a month and talk about, students can come to this and tell us what's happening on campus so that can better help us, and really unify. We have a lot of organizations in different parts of Madison County, and it's more about bringing everyone together and see who's doing what so that we're not duplicating efforts. So I think the key is communication and coordination so that we're not duplicating efforts and working together to get to our goal.
Absolutely. Communications is the key, and a lot of people just don't know what each position does. Like, I'm sure if I question the audience that says, what does a commissioner do? We just don't know everything. And I agree. Well, I admit that I don't know what the district judge does until I met future Judge Rucker. That's what I found out. So if we could just talk on that, help us understand what is that district judge position?
Sure, that's a good question, and one that I have enjoyed explaining to our community as we've learned more and more that education around our legal system has just really been lacking. We just don't understand as everyday citizens what happens in the courthouses that belong to you. So the district court judge here in Madison County, the way our court system is set up is we start with district court judges and circuit court judges, and then we start going into our kind of statewide judicial positions, appellate courts, and the Supreme Court. So the district court is kind of the first, what I call the first line of justice in the courthouse. That court will handle things like dependency cases, which involve children who have had some contact with DHR and may be kind of in flux with their family and may not be in the custody of their parents for some period of time. And that court will adjudicate whether or not there needs to be a safety plan in place for those children, or whether they will remain with their parents and whether those parents will keep their rights to their children. That's a big job. It's a big deal, and we want the right people sitting on the bench to make those decisions. The other thing that court does is deal with landlord-tenant disputes and then general civil cases up to $20,000. So if you have a personal injury case that's a $10,000 case, it's going to the district court. It's a court of limited jurisdiction is what we call it. So there are only certain things that can be adjudicated in there. There are no capital murder cases in the district court. The district court can handle preliminary issues for the higher courts, but they will not ever try a case for capital murder in the district court. But there are a lot of cases that come to this court each year. We have several judges sitting on the bench right now, none of whom are Democrats. We don't have any Democratic judges sitting on any bench in Madison County right now, other than maybe in the municipal court. So, but there's important work happening in the district court, and we need to be making a better effort to make sure that this community understands what's happening there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I did not know that. Did you know that? I did know that. I was just making sure you knew that. And now Ms. Alvarez on the school board. We all know what the school board does, because I've been to school for 20 years, and I have 3 kids, and I know your job. I'm sure you get that a lot. Everybody thinks they're expert at doing your job. So I want you to touch on that, because during your campaign, you were a big advocate for the youth, highlighting the barriers that children face all over Huntsville. Now that you're on the school board, can you talk to us about your personal mission for District 3 and for the school board?
Yes, definitely. So, number one, right out of the gate, before I was polished, before I even knew what I was getting into, it was early literacy and all kinds of preventative measures in K through 5. I truly feel like there had been no voice on the board for any child under high school age for years in Huntsville City. And we were losing the opportunity to get ahead of most of our problems. We didn't have any bullying intervention. We didn't have any gun safety courses. We didn't have any, we weren't even leaving school reading on grade level. And all those things just compound and compound and compound, and then suddenly people are crying in high school about them. And so to me, I was like, we need to get ahead of them in elementary school. And so that has been my focus. I truly want us to stop the bleeding right now where it comes to literacy and math proficiency. I want us to get ahead of that, and I want us to do it by first grade. Because I feel like you can catch up 1 year. You shouldn't wait till third grade like the state's asking us to. We need to do 1 year catch up with high intense intervention so that we don't even have to worry about the state guidelines at third grade for retaining for literacy or numeracy. That's my goal. It's going to take a long time to turn this ship around. We have 22,000 students right now, and we are struggling. About half of them are proficient, and that's from what we've done wrong, and then also learning loss from COVID and e-learning and everything else that we've been hit with. But it is my focus. It is what I know that I could personally advocate for and get resources for and do. And so I'm going to stick with my niche, which is focusing on that, and I think we're going to see a lot of improvement in Huntsville City Schools. It'll take time, but we're going to do it.
I'll go back to you, Ms. Manning. Just touching on your earlier question, you mentioned that people weren't ready for you. And I've encountered that a lot as well. People just don't know what to do with me sometimes. But I'm not going anywhere. So my question to you is, how do we get more people involved? How do we get more people engaged? How do we, when we walk through a room and it's a panel of men and we sit down, that people don't look at us funny? How do we do that?
Yeah, I think the first step in anything like this is to educate. We've got to educate our citizens and our community members about the importance of civic engagement and why it's important to have diverse civic engagement, meaning having diverse representatives, diverse local representatives and things like that. You've got to have women, you've got to have people of color, you've got to have all of these people represent us because that's the only way we have a true democracy. So yeah, I think educating on these topics and really getting into the nitty-gritty of what people's needs are and how we accommodate those needs is what we do.
Absolutely. I'm going to applaud for that one. I think education is key. I actually got an email once about us all dressing alike, all wearing darker colors because it was more professional. And I looked at that email, laughed, hit delete, and went back to bed. It clearly was not written for me. So thank you for that one. Who's next? Who's going to go to? Let's go back to you, Judge Rucker, future Judge Rucker. Let's talk about, that's one of those positions you mentioned there was no Democratic judge. Judges, it's hard to run for. I know you are an attorney and you might have to face your your opponent in court. Talk about the whole partisan versus nonpartisan judgeship. Like, why are we there?
So we are one of a few states that still has partisan judicial races. Most states have recognized that a judge is a position that should neither be beholden to a Democrat or a Republican, but you are duty bound to be beholden to the law and to be objective and impartial. And so we as a state really need to give up the power pool when it comes to our courts and work towards a nonpartisan judicial system of elections. When we were in this race this last cycle, my opponent and I would both say we agreed on that this is not about Democrats and Republicans, it's about the law. But every piece of material that we saw from her says she's here to bring her conservative values to the bench. And, I don't have a problem with you having conservative values, but your values, your personal values, don't belong on the bench, and nor do mine. So I really think as citizens we need to be engaged in pushing for a change there, and I'm certainly going to be engaged in pushing for that as we try to make this a more fair, more impartial judicial system for us here in Alabama.
Thank you. Ms. Hodges, you have a lot of experience running campaigns, and your job is difficult. You're helping progressive candidates and Democratic candidates in a state that is red, and I'm sure sometimes it can feel like an uphill battle. Sometimes you win, sometimes we learn. Let's talk about those hard learning moments that some people can translate as losses. How do we deal with that?
Yes, I think living in a state like Alabama, it is very difficult. We work very hard, everyone at this up here and everyone in the audience. We work very hard during campaigns, but I think the real work is done as soon as the campaign ends. And so I don't see the campaign as a loss, I see it as a lesson. And not only that, is you're gaining something, you're gaining knowledge. When you win, what happens? You go home excited and you don't think about what you just did. But when you lose, you really dig in to what just happened. You look in, you ask questions. When you win, you don't ask questions. You just walk in and take your position. So when you do lose, you start asking those questions. And I think that is what's so important. And it really reveals an opportunity for Democrats in the state of Alabama, because we are asking questions. Why does Alabama have the lowest voter engagement in 36 years? Republicans aren't asking that. We are asking that because our voters didn't come out, so we didn't get the wins that we wanted in Madison County. And so we go in to dissect those numbers. We look at what's happening. Is it the messaging? Is it, did we have issues with fundraising? We can dissect every part of the campaign. And so I think there's real power in that. And I don't see them, again, as losses. I see it as gaining knowledge, because now we can work together and go back to those organizations and start bringing the resources together and seeing, you know what, our top priority needs to be voter engagement. Why? Because we had the lowest voter turnout in 36 years in the state of Alabama. So that should be our top priority. And so with those losses, we're able to really identify what we need to work on and what we need to work together on, and make those changes in our strategic plan moving forward.
So I'll ask one last question, and then we'll take one or two questions for the panelists, and then we'll get to our main speaker. But Representative Alvarez, we are so proud of you, and you are in office. And now that we are here, how can we support you? How can we support our school board as you make investment into our children?
So as of today, there's at least 6 or 7, bills getting reviewed that could possibly impact education. We need people out there promoting public schools. I told you, I was very honest, we are 50% proficient. I also do not believe that any private school or any homeschool can do better than that for all 22,000 of Huntsville City schools. There's no way. We don't have the infrastructure. And so we need people out there saying that. We can't just flip a switch and send all these kids to get these top-of-the-line scholarships to some other school. We're not set up for that. And the work that these 2 ladies are doing rolls into education. We have kids that live in the parking lot of our schools. We have kids whose parents get arrested the night before. We have kids whose mamas do not come home overnight, and they have to get themselves up to get to school, and we feed them, and we dress them, and we buy their Christmas, and that is public school. And yes, we may not be getting, class after class of rocket scientists out the door, but we are doing what we were supposed to do, what Thomas Jefferson said for the Founding Fathers to do, which is a basic appropriate education. And so, thankfully, Huntsville has enough local funds that we have been able to enhance that education, and we are doing some of the coolest things that you could imagine. If you go to our tech schools and you see the welding programs, if you see the phlebotomy programs, there's kids in there learning how to be eye doctors and jazz musicians. I mean, we are providing way more than what is the requirement. But if we lose funding, all that goes away. And that impacts everyone. And I think we need advocates, and then we need people supporting our teachers. It is a thankless industry. It has been really, really beat up the last couple of years, and we need people out there defending those teachers, sending them happy. If any of you have any organization that ever does goodie bags or a drive or whatever, Kleenex, candy, donuts, anything, just send it to your local school like you guys do firefighters or police officers. Just think one more step, and you will make the difference, because a little bit of happy, most of the teachers are empaths. They just need that one little grain of salt to keep going, and they can make it through a really bad day. And so that's what we need from the community. And then, you know, come in, see our schools, see what we're offering, and see what we need, and help where you can. And that's what I need. That's what we need.
All right, you got a marching order. I know we have several students here, so before I take my seat, though, I will entertain one or two questions, maybe one question from any of the students. Anybody that has a question for any of our panelists?
My name is Leah Nelson, like I said earlier today, and I kind of have like 2 questions. I hate to be that guy.
You that guy. Go ahead.
But my first question is, one, as a person who wants to be one day a politician, what is the end? Like, where do I go to get the information I need to become part of the panel or part of the, you know, the leaders or like the commissioners of the, personally, like, I know I want to, but I don't know. Yeah,
I will give you my number.
Yeah, I stopped short of giving her email address out with answers.
Thank you. And my second question is, I don't want to step on any toes here, but I do see in the crowd there are less students and are, I'm gonna say, grown folk. And I believe that our next generation is Gen Z, and they are the next leaders and the next politicians and voters. So what are you doing to make sure the information gets out to those students, or to even, like, because me personally, I didn't know this was here until my professor told me about it. And so I believe that if we want to get people to, you know, join like 18-year-olds and up, we need to be able to give them the information to do these things. So what are you doing to make sure they get that information?
Look at me again.
I think April and I both had some time with students at A&M this week as part of the Civil Rights Symposium that was hosted on campus. And my conversation with students at A&M was great, very interesting. I learned a lot from them about our failings in engaging students in this last election cycle. And I think the key for us at this point going forward is to trust you all with leadership. We cannot try to yoke you and make you. We need to empower you to lead. And that is my expectation in the next election cycle. I have identified several students who I intend to empower to lead. And I'm going to leave it to those students to engage their peers, because I think you are the ones who do it best.
All right, thank you.
No,
Oh, yeah, I agree with her. We did have students last cycle help us out, but we definitely failed in that. And so there's a lot of work to do, but as she said, it's on you all, but it's on us to empower you and give you the tools that you need and the path. So I look forward to working with you and getting you elected.
So real quick before the panel leaves, will anyone who has run for office, worked on a campaign, volunteered, will you stand? If you have had anything to do with a campaign, you just stand. Thank you. I just want to say thank you. And we need you. And again, this program is for you, because I know that it gets hard and I know that you get frustrated. And I will be totally candid with you. When I ran, I got so frustrated at one point, I said, if I lose this, I'm done. I'm never doing this again. I am out. And I realized I was coming from a place of fear and really a place of ignorance. That wasn't the way to go. Because there's knowledge. There's knowledge. And it would, even if it would win, lose, draw, what you have gone through, we need to share with that next generation. We need to share with those. It makes no sense for me to bump my head and then go home and sulk because I didn't get the results I wanted. If I bump my head, win or lose, I feel like it's my job to share with the next generation, or to empower you, or to nurture you, or to reward you, and that's the only way we can move forward. So that was a point of personal privilege. I just wanted to say thank you so very, 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 very much. All right, give yourselves a hand. Thank you, panelists.
Hello, everyone. Can we give another round of applause for our panelists and amazing moderator? For those who may not know, my name is Lisa Handback. I'm the Vice Chair for Persistence PAC, and I'm just so glad to see so many new and familiar faces here tonight. And if you're like me, the current state of politics, especially here in Alabama, can be and has been very disheartening. We made some incredible strides in the 2022 election, as we know, but it can still feel like we're fighting a losing battle. But just as our fantastic panel demonstrated, there is hope for a better Alabama. And there is no one more qualified, in my opinion, to speak on and inspire hope than John Pavlovitz. And I mean, he literally wrote the book on it. And all of us in this room are here because we know that Alabama is worth fighting for. And John knows that too, and that's why he is here, and we are so incredibly grateful that he is here with us tonight to provide us with a big picture view about the nation that is and could be, why good people matter now more than ever, and why we can't afford to give up. So please join me in welcoming renowned pastor, author, activist, and my friend, John Pavlovitz.
Well, good evening, friends. Am I on? Huh. Maybe that's me. Oh, now. Okay. Well, hello. So good to be with you tonight. That's going to be... Okay, what we're going to do, we're going to keep this. I'm going to go with a handheld. Good night, everybody. Great job. 1, 2. Hi. The reason why I don't usually use these is because I talk with my hands as being someone raised Italian, so now I'm going to have to speak half of what I would normally speak. But it is so good to be here with the lovers and the helpers and the healers and the activists and the caregivers and the damn givers. Would you give yourselves a round of applause as we gather tonight? This is my third trip to Huntsville, and actually I made an online trip, but it's my first in-person visit since 2019. And since then, we've had a historic and deadly planetary health crisis. We've had a bloodless and bloody coup attempt plotted by a defeated despot and his sycophants, and a white Christian nationalist terrorist group has taken control of the House. So call the babysitter, it's gonna be a while, we've got stuff to talk about, right? No wonder you're so tired. Now, I want to just share a couple things about me for those who don't know. 25 years ago, I was an agnostic with suspicions. I was sitting in the second highly polished pew of a small suburban Pennsylvania church where my wife and I had recently been married. And the service was coming to a close, and I was wrestling with deep theological questions, like where we were going to eat that afternoon, and whether or not the Eagles' offensive line could handle the Giants' defensive pressure, very spiritual things. And a woman tapped me on the shoulder, and I turned around and she said, "John, I've been thinking about you and praying about you, and I think you would make an amazing youth leader." And I smiled and thought to myself, I know you. You're the current youth leader. She had done her time, right? She had paid her debt to society. She was getting out and she needed a sucker, a volunteer, a minister of the Lord. And fortunately, I fit the two main criteria for small church youth ministry. I was young and I was there, right? And so she said, "What would you want to come tonight to our youth meeting and check out what we're about?" And I said, "What could that alter about the complete trajectory of my life?" But it turned out that over the weeks and months that followed, I realized that I had a heart for teenagers, that I loved being around adolescents, that I wanted to spend time with the people most reasonable adults avoided. Like I was like a demented storm chaser. Like, that looks horrible, let's go there. And what happened was I ended up walking down the road of ministry, and I had been working as an art director, and I finally left my full-time career to enter into church ministry, and that was 25 years ago. But the last decade of that journey has been spent ministering to a sprawling, disparate virtual congregation made up of people all over the planet. Because what happened in my church setting was I started to have theological questions about the existence of hell and the purpose of prayer. I started to have questions about the validity of the Bible. I started to have questions about why we treated LGBTQ people the way we treated them. I started to have questions about why there were so few people of color in our supposedly diverse church. I started to have questions about why there were no female pastors in our denomination. And I began to wrestle with those questions and finally decided I was going to preach the questions. I was going to write the tensions. And I remember I started at a new church, and about 5 or 6 months into my time there, I heard God calling me to leave that church. And it came in the form of my pastor's voice saying, "You're fired." Because it turns out that I found this authenticity and this specificity as a pastor, but that churches valued my boldness when that boldness did not confront something in them that they held sacred. So once I started talking about sexuality or race or gender, well, that was really not something that they wanted. And so I have found myself on the outside with this online congregation of people. And in the work that I do, in my travels both in person and online, I hear hundreds of stories every week. And at this point, I don't consider myself an author or a blogger or even a pastor. I consider myself a collector of stories, a war correspondent. I step into a new town, or I reach a place like Huntsville, or I reach people where they are online, and I step into the trenches of life with people, and I say, "Tell me what's happening here on the ground so that I can tell the folks back home." And people give me a front row seat to their varied experience of being human. People show me their grief. They share with me their suffering. They reveal to me their dreams, and I sit with them and I hear the words that they share, and I listen for the places their voices break. And I leave my time with them asking, what are they trying to say that they cannot quite verbalize? What would they share if their voices could reach more people? How can I connect their humanity with the humanity that does not share geographic or relational space with them? And that's the place I write and speak and minister from. I do my best to be a translator of diverse experiences and bring those stories together so that we can find our commonalities. So, Huntsville, it's been a while. What's happening here on the ground? How are you as you enter this place? Why have you come here tonight? Someone share with me. You can shout it out and I'll repeat it back. Tell me why you're here in this room tonight.
Because we love you.
Because you love me. I always tell people, if you've read everything I've ever written, you only know 100% of what I choose to share online. Right? So thank you for loving the parts that I reveal to you. Why else are you here, friends?
Be encouraged.
I give you hope. I'm grateful for that, but I want you to understand that it's a reciprocal relationship. About a year and a half ago, I had brain surgery. They found one, which was good, but I had brain surgery, and I found that for the first time I understood that this virtual community that we've built, it's not inferior community, it's just different. And so people were able to support me and sustain me. And I tell people all the time, knowing that you're reading the writing is as valuable to me as you knowing that I'm writing the work. Why else are you here, friends? Yes?
I'm an atheist and I want Christians to be more Christ-like.
You're an atheist who wants Christians to be more Christ-like. Amen. Can I say amen to that? Why else are you here? Anyone? Yeah.
I wanted to see who else was going to be here.
You want to see who else is going to be here? Well, there they are.
Who I
So
know and who I want to know who is in this room.
beautiful. And that's a perfect segue into our time tonight. She wanted to know who was going to be in this room because often you don't need someone coming from outside of Huntsville to tell you how Huntsville is because I don't know. I only know that there are some universal things that we have that we share, and I'm going to try to share some of those things tonight so that you can then look around this room and say, I need to put every single person in this room on my phone contacts list because we have work to do together, right? But I wanted to begin, I actually wrote a piece, a blog post the day after, or really in the middle of the night after the 2016 election. It was called "This Is Why We Grieve Today." And I want just to read a bit of this. "I don't think you understand us right now. I think you think this is about politics. I think you believe this is all just sour grapes, the crocodile tears of the losing locker room with the scoreboard going against us at the buzzer. I can only tell you that you're wrong. This is not about losing an election. This isn't about not winning a contest. This is about two very different ways of seeing the world. Hillary Clinton spoke about a diverse America, one where religion or skin color or sexual orientation or place of birth aren't liabilities or deficiencies or moral defects. Her campaign was one of inclusion and connection and interdependency. It was about building bridges and breaking ceilings. It was about going high. The other person imagined a very selective America, one that is largely white and straight and Christian, and the voting verified this. He has never made any assertions otherwise. He ran a campaign of fear and exclusion and isolation, and that's the vision of the world that those who voted for him have endorsed. They have aligned with the wall builder and the genitalia grabber, and they have co-signed his body of work regardless of the reasons they give for their vote. Every horrible thing he ever said about women or Muslims or people of color has now been validated by voters. Every profanity-laced press conference, every call to bully protesters, every ignorant diatribe has been endorsed. A huge portion of this country has declared these things acceptable, American, Christian. We're not angry that our candidate lost. We're angry because our candidate's losing means this country will be less safe and less kind and less available to a huge segment of the population, and that's just the truth. Those who have felt vulnerable now are left more so. Those whose voices have been silenced will be further quieted. Those who have always felt marginalized will be pushed to the periphery further. And those who feared they were seen as inferior now have actual confirmation in percentages. This has never been about politics. It's not one candidate over the other. It's not red versus blue. It's about overt racism and hostility toward minorities. It's about religion being weaponized. It's about crassness and vulgarity and disregard for women being rewarded. It's about a barricaded, militarized bully nation. It's about an unapologetic, open-faced ugliness. This is not about a difference of opinion, as that's too small a thing to mourn over. It's about a fundamental difference in the way we believe people should be treated, not just those who look or talk or think or vote the way that we do. Grief always laments what might have been, the future that we were robbed of, the tomorrow we won't get to see, and that is the grief we walk through today. As a nation, we had the opportunity to affirm beauty, the beauty of our diversity. We had the chance to choose ideas over sound bites, to let everyone know they had a place at the table, to be the beacon of goodness and decency that we imagine we are, and we collectively said no. The scriptures say that weeping endures for a night, but joy comes in the morning, but we can't see the dawn coming right now, and this is why we grieve today. 6 years after writing that, the thing we most probably want to say in this room is, "We told you so." Do you ever feel like saying that to people? Do you find yourself saying that to people? You're probably of higher quality than me, but I feel that way all the time. Many of us have been living with the reality of the America that we have today, the Alabama that you have today. We've been living with that looming on the horizon of history. And we knew the day was coming, and we sounded every alarm, we rang every bell, we shot up 1,000 desperate flares to rile people out of the numbed stupor of their laziness or their apathy or their false security, and awaken them to the slow, almost imperceptible erosion of the bedrock of liberty around them. That is the work that you've been doing. Day after day, we crafted every urgent plea possible to persuade them, haven't we? appealing to their intellects and their hearts and their humanity. And they told us that we were exaggerating, that we were overreacting, that we were drifting into melodrama or delusion, that the doom we were forecasting was a fabrication, that such grim realities were virtual impossibilities. They said that the center would hold, that an entire political party would not be consumed by a human being, that our elected officials would not abandon their calling, that the Christian church would never discard its namesake, that good people would not embrace conspiracy, that the courts would protect the law, that the system would not fail us, that democracy was bulletproof. And guess what? We often told that to one another to get each other through these days. The sky is not falling, Chicken Little, they said to us. You need to relax. But as we watch the rights of women to have autonomy over their own bodies and healthcare decisions teetering on the abyss, we have to face reality. The sky is falling. When we realize that the highest court in our nation has been fatally polluted by a serial grifter and his cadre of predatory ghouls, we have to admit, yeah, the sky is falling. As the likelihood of a white evangelical theocracy grows exponentially higher and the possibility of minority rule becomes increasingly likely, yes, the sky is falling. When every guardrail of the law and the free press and the consciences of good people seem to be failing simultaneously in a perfect storm of circumstances, too massive for us to outrun or avoid, we have to admit, friends, the sky is falling. So what do people of faith and morality and conscience do when the heavens come crashing down? When the worst case scenario plays out in real time? When the arc of the moral universe is bending sharply toward injustice, what do decent human beings do when the sky is falling? Well, we hold up the damn sky together. And Alabama, this is why you are here. I'm here to help you gain your strength so you can start pushing back all that has been falling. How do we hold up the sky? We transform our outrage into action. We channel every bit of grief and anger and fear into a focused and productive response. We waste no time in useless performative displays of social media despair. We stop our infighting over issues that are ultimately not more pressing than preserving democracy and protecting the planet and defending disparate humanity. Because the people who are bringing all this inequity and this predatory exclusionary movement, the people who are part of that movement know how to get together for their common purpose, and we need to make sure that we don't miss that. We abandon our doom scrolling and our hand wringing and our prophesying of disaster, and we log out of our devices and we step out into our communities and into the trenches of our local communities, doing the work of saving what we can. We give and we work and we organize and we sweat and we fight, and when we feel we will expire, we rest and we begin it all again. Tonight, I want you to take that rest. I want you to exhale deeply. I want you to rest in how tired you are. I want you to rest in all the failure you feel, all the indecision, all that's looming on the horizon, and I want you to be present right now. And I don't want you to miss the gravity of this moment together, because in this room is all that you need to alter the course of Alabama. There is enough here to work with. I'm from the Christian tradition, and Jesus had like 12 guys. And other women who were not given credit, as usual. Right? These days, friends, as difficult and unthinkable as they are, they're not new. You know that, right? Right after the election, I was talking to a friend of mine, happens to be a woman of color, and I said, you know, everything feels upside down right now. It feels like we're never going to have justice. Things are never going to be fair anymore. We're never going to have, she said, welcome to being black. And she reminded me that this new feeling that I was having was part of her default setting. And we have to remember that, not just in this country, but throughout the planet. That we're not standing where billions of others haven't stood before, right? Watching what seems like the inexorable march of fascism and the unavoidable arrival of autocracy, and feeling the hopelessness creeping up our bodies like a quickly rising flood. We are not the first people to experience this. And in every such place and time in the history of the planet, despite the dwindling odds and the mounting terrors and the vanishing options, the good people have done what good people always do. They have bravely and steadfastly spent themselves on behalf of those who would follow them so that they might inherit something a little more beautiful and a little bit less violent than had they never lived. And this is what you get to do with your very life. You get to spend yourselves on behalf of the people who came before you. And this is our invitation. This is our calling. I know you've experienced political losses. And I know the loss of human and civil rights is terrifying. I don't want to downplay that, diminish how terrifying it all is. But anything that you feel like you are losing right now or are in danger of losing is because someone else fought so that we could have it to begin with. Back then, the people who came before us, they felt hopeless too. They faced every kind of adversity that we are facing, and for some reason, they decided that we were worth carrying on. The right for women to have autonomy over their bodies, the rights of all people to marry the person they love, the rights for people to feel safe in a traffic stop, the rights for people that we can't even imagine will be taken away, rights to vote and to exist and to love the person they love and to be inhabiting the body that they want to inhabit. We owe a debt of gratitude to all the people who came before us, and part of that gratitude is refusing to become so tired and so frustrated and so disheartened that we give up. Because we are part of a continuum of compassionate activists. We are a long lineage of dam givers. Not long ago, I received a letter in the mail from a woman in her 90s, and she said, John, I was raised in the Netherlands and under Hitler. And she said, my entire family was tortured and killed in the prison camps in Dachau. And she said, I see history repeating here. And she said, it terrifies me, and I just want you to know that I need you to keep going. And I told her that I would, and that's what I'm here to tell you. Every day in my travels, and every day online, people say, John, how do you stay hopeful right now? How do you keep going when there's so much to grieve over, so much cruelty in front of you, when there's such daily violence to contend with? How do you stay hopeful? And I say, chocolate and wine. And then whatever else, right? But I often tell them that I stay hopeful for Anne Frank. The Jewish teenager wrote these words in the early 1940s while confined within the cramped upper rooms above an Amsterdam business that became her entire world for 3 years of her far too brief life while her family hid from the Nazis. She wrote these words as a teenager. It's really a wonder that I haven't dropped my ideals because they seem so absurd and impossible to carry out. Yet I keep them because in spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart. And every time I read those words or think about those words, I remember why I stay hopeful right now. I stay hopeful because she stayed hopeful. Despite every reason to abandon the will to continue or the optimism to sustain her, she refused to abandon it. And the beautiful defiance of her young heart revealed in those words is reason enough for us to keep going. Especially on a day committed to hatred by a group of people for Jewish people in America, something that's happening 80 years later. I stay hopeful because hopelessness is not an option. Hopelessness is defeat and resignation. It is willing surrender to the darkness, and it insults the memory of so many who have courageously made this planet their home long before we ever showed up. And I stay hopeful because people of every nationality, religious affiliation, and life circumstance have preceded us. They've experienced all manner during their lifetimes of hell, unspeakable suffering, unspeakable fear, and they would not relent. Are you going to say that you relent? Because I don't believe you're capable of that. See, I don't really have to say any of this to you because it's a Saturday night and you're here talking about the world that you want to make. We who inhabit this planet in these days have inherited it from the children and the activists and the caregivers and the helpers and the healers and the parents, the ordinary people who would not allow themselves to become so despondent and so weary in their present circumstance that they stopped giving a damn. And now it's our turn. This is our moment to spend our fragile and fleeting sliver of space and time here, and for the sake of our predecessors in humanity and for our descendants who will be here long after we're gone, we can't blow it. We can't allow ourselves to be overcome by the pain in our path. We can't wilt in the face of hatred. We can't become apathetic or stay silent or sidestep the turbulence of engaging the ugliness. You're here and you're alive. As bad as it is, you're here and you're alive. With all the shit going on in the world, you're here and you're alive. With everything there is to complain about and lament, you're here and you're alive. So what is there left that I need to tell you? Maybe it's this. Bono of U2 says, this is no time not to be alive. People who care deeply about the world, about equity, about justice, they're more necessary and more valuable than ever. You know, plumbers are never as important as when your pipes have burst, right? Firefighters never feel more valuable than when there is smoke pouring out of your windows. Car repair people are the most valuable when you're on the side of the road. And as I found out a year and a half ago, neurosurgeons matter a lot when there's something in your brain that needs to be removed. You are more valuable than ever right now, because we are in a time when cruelty is trending. Hopelessness, silence, stopping, they're not even options. We're not even going to talk about them. Now, resting and caring for yourself and sustaining yourself for the long haul, they are options. You don't need to do everything all the time. You are a finite resource. Yes, you are a once in history, never to be repeated creation, and you have gifts and talents, and your voice matters. Like all the panelists here said, they made their life matter in ways that some of us only dream about. But the truth is, we are all capable of moving the arc of the moral universe toward justice. Whatever you wish more decent people were doing in Germany in 1930, do that now. Whenever you look back on the civil rights movement and you think about the courage of people in those days, find some of that courage for yourself today. Fred Rogers says, when I was a boy, I would see scary things in the news, and my mother would say to me, look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping. We don't look for the helpers. We become the people those who are in need of help see. What an honor it is to be a sign of hope for someone else, to be the helper, the healer, the activist, the caregiver, the damn giver, the citizen of the planet who is moved by other people's sufferings. Embrace the fact that you are given that gift. That's why, as terrible as these days are, individually and collectively, we were made for days like these. When people wonder if caring human beings still exist, we get to tell them yes. When people ask if there are spiritual communities who aren't looking to take away people's human rights, we can remind them they do exist. When vulnerable people wonder if they are alone, we can assure them that they are not. I'm going to share a little bit more, and then we're going to open up the floor, but I want to acknowledge that you are probably three things tonight. I want to name them. I want to affirm them. I know you're angry. I drove past you in the parking lot. You know, a family member texted me not long ago, seemingly out of the blue, and he said, "You're coming across as really angry lately." And I responded, "Good. I was afraid I wasn't communicating correctly," right? And he goes, "See, he didn't enjoy the sarcasm and the spirit in which I intended it." And he said, "I just feel sorry for you, all that anger." And I texted back, "Don't feel sorry for me. I know why I'm angry and I think it's worth it. I know why I'm angry and I think they're worth it." He didn't text me again. It's been 2 years. I have a running argument with myself. I am of two minds when it comes to anger, right? On one hand, I have fully embraced my anger, and I felt it propelling me into places where there was injustice. And on the other hand, I have felt and seen its destructive capabilities firsthand. Those times in my life when anger was a liability, a trouble starter, a relationship killer. And I know that's a tension that we all sit in every day, between my anger and my response to that anger. But as we think about being compassionate people who alter Alabama or alter the world or change America, it's important to realize that there is something, that anger and love aren't mutually exclusive, right? That sometimes what seems like anger is actually this love within us, this deep heart for humanity that pushes us into places we wouldn't otherwise be. Many times anger is this holy discontent that internally disrupts us, right, to the point of sickness. Anger is a natural, almost involuntary response. It's an alarm that says something is not right. It's this combustible moment when we find ourselves passionately perturbed. During the protests over the murders of George Floyd and so many other people of color, I watched this line of moms in Portland. This was a group of women locking their arms to defend protesters in a heavily armed paramilitary presence sent there precisely to provoke and harass and use force against. And all these mothers did was stand there and lock arms in solidarity. They were inarguably angry, but their anger was fueled by their love for humanity, right? And by the imminent threat to it. And that anger propelled them out of their homes and into the far more treacherous streets. There was nothing hateful or adversarial about them. There was nothing destructive in their choices, but they were perceived that way. And when we stand beside people who are being abused, or people who are being mistreated, or being marginalized, or being dehumanized, we are going to face some of the pushback, and we should be joyfully doing so. And as a Christian, I have a hard time justifying anger, because biblically, there's a lot of bad stuff about it. But then I look at this Jesus that I grew up around, and Jesus had what I want to take the word anger away from you and relieve you of that. I want to call it ferocity. I want you to have a ferocity for humanity, right? That ferocity that a family dog uses when it protects a child from a coyote, right? A ferocity that a parent acts with when there is a fire in their home. The ferocity that my wife shows when I see a spider in the bathtub. I just instruct her it's there. But that ferocity for humanity is something that we can't let go of. So as you think about your anger, decide, how am I going to transform my anger into something that is measurable and tangible and redemptive? Because if we only get angry and we sit in that anger is going to turn toxic. But if we can transform it into something else, then it's going to be catalytic. Maya Angelou says, you should be angry. You must not be bitter. Bitterness is like cancer. It eats upon the host. It doesn't do anything to the object of its displeasure. So use your anger. You write it, you paint it, you dance it, you march it, you vote it, you do everything about it, you talk it, you never stop talking it. I know you're angry, but I also know you're something else. I know you're grieving. In Minnesota, just before the pandemic, I was walking through a church lobby, and this woman said, John, can I talk to you for a second? And I said, sure, we'll do the walk and talk. And we were walking and talking, and within about 5 seconds, she started to cry, which I tried not to take personally. But she said, John, I hate who I am right now. She said, I am so angry all the time. She said, I hate how angry I am. I don't even recognize that person. And I said, you might be angry, but you're probably something else. You might be grieving. Have you ever considered that you're in loss right now, that you're mourning? And she said, I never thought about it that way. And she started to list all the things that she's lost. She said, I've lost my friendships. I've lost people that I loved. I've lost security. And she started embracing the idea of grief. Grief and anger can often look the same from the outside, right? I don't know why you're here tonight, but I imagine you're here and you're grieving the loss of something. You're grieving the loss of someone you love. You're grieving your idea of God or country or family. You're grieving your belief in the goodness of people. You're grieving the loss of a relationship with someone you once felt fully at home with. You may be grieving the loss of your sense of optimism about the future, or the body you once walked around in, or your emotional and mental well-being. You may have lost the lightness that you used to feel when you woke up in the morning. You may be grieving the loss of every single one of these things. And I want you to be thankful for that, because that grief is confirmation of your goodness. Because I know the nagging question you ask yourself all the time. You say, is it me, or has a huge portion of this country lost its mind? It is you. That's the good and the bad news. You're quite fine. But the fact that you see how wrong this all is, the fact that you are grieving, means your faculties are intact. It means your mind is fully right. It means your heart is still working properly. It means you still have a soul doing what a soul is required to do. Keep us deeply human in profoundly inhumane times. So if you're grieving, celebrate that. So I know you're angry, and I know you're grieving, and I know you're tired. Because you are a damn giver. And it's exhausting to give a damn, isn't it? To be a person of compassion in a time and a place when compassion is in such great demand. You wake up every day and you push back against predatory politicians and toxic systems and corrupt legislation and human rights atrocities and acts of treason and your family members who are going out of their minds, right? The volume and the relentlessness of the threats can wear you out. Have you noticed? Because you're carrying so much around right now. You're carrying systems and you're carrying stories. You're carrying systems. You're carrying the realities of systemic racism. You're carrying around the realities of homophobia. You're carrying around the realities of xenophobia. And that would be enough if you were just carrying around your awareness of the systemic brokenness in our world. But you're carrying something else. You're carrying around the names and the faces and the lives of individual people who you know who are under duress because of these systemic ills. And what happens to all this stuff? What happens to all this pain and all this anger and all the loss and all the suffering and the grief? Where does it reside? It resides in you. It resides in the headache that you have that won't go away. It resides in your clenched jaw. It resides in your elevated heart rate. It resides in the knot in the pit of your stomach that returns every day when you watch the news or you go on social media or you step out into your community or you step out into your kitchen and you realize how much compassion is required of you and how little you feel you have left. You are tired. And it's in this time of relentless urgency and profound grieving and relational fracture that we gather here in this theater in Huntsville, Alabama. And whether you are an activist or a minister or a caregiver or just a citizen of the planet who is moved by suffering, you feel the heaviness of these days. Speed and activity can mask it for a little while. That's why you do so much so often, because you love to do it. But also, if we keep going and we keep planning and we do events and we go to rallies, maybe we stop thinking about how broken it all is and how much it's hurt us. See, if we stop long enough, though, the fatigue catches up to us, doesn't it? I want to give you permission to let the fatigue catch up with you tonight. I want you to give yourself permission to temporarily tap out, to withdraw for just a little bit, to protect yourself so that you can keep going. Because, friends, the goal here is not you expiring early. It is not you becoming a martyr of your own heart. It is not you doing so much that you expire. The goal is to be a fully formed human being whose relationships around them have your presence in them so that you can go out and do the work of activism. So I know you're angry, and I know you're grieving, and I know you're tired. And I want to pause right here, and I want to open up the floor for thoughts that you've been having, questions that you have, responses to anything. It doesn't have to have anything to do with something that I shared so far tonight, but what is on your mind? We've got people ready to pass microphones. Just put up your hand and we'll get the microphone to you. Put your hand up so they can see you. We're bidding on a live auction.
Thank you, John, for your words.
Thank you.
Regarding to what you were talking about, this anger and so forth, I'm not angry, but my problem is that I'm trying to understand how come decent people, I know, and that are here in Huntsville, accept all the disparity and all the horrible things that our political system are imposing upon us. That's what I'm trying to understand. How come good people, side with that? That's one of the points,
Okay, great. Here's a short answer to that question. Why do otherwise decent people support indecency? Well, there are a couple of reasons. One of them, the primary engine of all of this is fear, right? Politics at its worst And religion at its worst, they leverage fear. They press into the places of privilege and prejudice and phobia. And what they do is they tell people, see what we see on the conservative religion and politics is an adversarial movement. It needs an encroaching enemy. It needs people to feel threatened. And so what it does is it ratchets up all the fear and all the phobias, and it gets people in a state where they are perpetually terrified. And no one is at their best when they're afraid. And the problem is we have been so vilified by a group of people because there is control in the fear. When I had a pastor, he said, John, I became a progressive pastor and I grieved losing hell. He said, when I had hell, I could get people to do anything. I could get them to give and to proselytize and to vote. And when I didn't have hell anymore, I didn't know how to threaten people into action. And so when we look at a conservative theology, it's built on a fear of God, a fear of immigrants, a fear of gay people, over and over again. And that's why I grieve for people. The people we're talking about right now, they're fully formed human beings who deserve to have a better life than the life they're having, riddled with fear. So on one hand, I feel compassion because I understand what it was like, and when you're in that for 4 decades, 5 decades, it can be really difficult when you believe that God is out to squash you. But then I feel sorry for them, but then I don't feel sorry for the damage they're doing to marginalized, vulnerable, oppressed people, so I have to figure that out. But I always tell people, look for the fears in false stories. Find the places where people are believing a lie or being manipulated or subsisting on inaccurate information, and then try to give them what they lack. If they lack objective data, do your best to give it to them. If they lack decent people around them, try to be that decent presence. But what we're trying to do is make people feel less fear because they're going to operate in a much more sane, more humane way. You take out the fear of conservative religion, there's nothing left, right? And there's whiteness, pretty much.
You helped me have an epiphany because how do we convince people? But it just occurred to me that all of us should call our governor and so forth over the next few weeks and say this bumper sticker line, Jesus would expand Medicaid.
Well, and that's a perfect example. Yeah, when you're God, we all have if you're a person of faith of any kind, we all make God slightly or substantially in our own image. Right? I read the Bible, I've taught the Bible. Funny, God tends to agree with me, which is why I love him so. But when you have people who they genuinely believe that God believes that white people are of more value, when you have people who actually believe that God was going to send people to hell for their sexuality, it's hard for me or you to argue with God and win, because they're terrified of hell ultimately. What else? What else is on your mind? Anything? Down in the front row here, in the spit zone, the splash zone. Thank you.
Actually, what you were talking about reminded me of a poem that I wrote a while back.
Yeah, put the microphone real close to your. There you go.
People of the world, stand up. The diligence you give to your life, give to yourself. Invade your space with your presence. Wake the world with your compassion. Hold your childhood in your embrace. Fill your limbs with your soul. Pay homage to your mother's mother. Be a hero for your child's daughter. The cruelty in this world will not destroy us when we embrace one another. Stand up. Stand up for your dreams. Stand up for your babies. Stand up for her babies. Stand up.
Thank you for sharing that. You have to follow up? We had a follow up right behind her.
Sure. Yeah, and I want to refer to what you were talking at the very beginning of the difference in our society. At least, let's say here in Huntsville, but for instance, I guess every city, every place in our country. The youth, the middle age, and the older people, there are segments that they don't talk to each other, they don't cross, they don't understand each other. That creates this atmosphere of negation, of what the country's going through, you know.
That's a great point. So he said that young people, that middle-aged people, that elderly people, that there is not an intergenerational mix, and especially true probably on the left, because what the conservative movement, it operates around the church is still the hub of everything that happens. And so you see children, when I talk about sexuality to groups of teenagers, most of them are like, that's old news. We don't even think about that anymore, unless they're in that really rigid Christian culture, right? But the intergenerational thing is difficult because in the 60s, we had movements that were, those were movements of youth that were happening. And I think for young people, they're engaged, but it's very hard beyond a social media context to figure out, how do I plug into the tangible world where I am? How can I even, I think many of them probably don't have resources and access to people like you, which is why a night like this is so great. Because whether people are old or young, what I always remind people is that social media is not activism, right? Because we can put our hashtags up, and I've had countless experiences where I said, look at this person's social media presence. Oh, he or she is going to win this campaign. And they didn't, because that doesn't always translate into on-the-ground voting. So I think groups of activist groups need to reach young people and not just give them a message that all these things are happening, but to invite them into the work, into the trenches of doing that. So hopefully tonight some of that will happen, because I think that intergenerational separation, it is a huge barrier to us, because we're coming at this at a disadvantage. Because, like I said earlier, when you have something like hell, or the dangers of LGBTQ people, or the threat of immigrants, it's easy to get your people fired up. But progressives go, we love people! And then that's hard to get people fired up for. So what can we leverage? I think we leverage the fact that humanity is being destroyed in our lifetime, the human rights and the civil rights and the dignity of people. And if we can't get people urgent about that, then we have real problems. Here. Oh, yes.
Communication and the free press. Huntsville does not have a daily newspaper. And Huntsville has a lot of empty seats, and when you have an election, nobody runs against the prevailing party.
Yeah.
And I like to write letters to the editor and have a bunch of people mad at me because they get up and they run for office and they, I'm not happy. I need people to hate me.
I've made a living doing that. I think we have, that's one of the ways that when you talk about the attacks on the free press, that is actually one of the ways, social media is a gift, because you have something that I never had growing up. You have a way to perpetuate truth, right? You have a way to broadcast a message that would not reach people any other way. In fact, the only reason that I am here with you, that we have met one another, is largely due to the existence of social media. So it is a valuable tool, and it is probably the only thing we have to keep free speech alive, and so we have to use it, for sure. I thought there was a hand down in the third row here in the center. Oh, hi up there.
Do you see any hope?
No.
Well, I don't either. No. But do you see any hope that some evangelicals are abandoning Trump, or do you think it's just they read the election results and are trying to find another horse to ride?
Well, here's what I'll say about that. My experience is that I've often said organized religion and organized crime can be very similar. When you're on the inside, when you're part of the family, you're fiercely loved and you're passionately protected, but the moment you deviate or the moment you have your allegiances questioned, it's like concrete shoes and horse heads in the bed, that kind of thing. What the conservative right is showing us is community is so powerful. Our need to belong is so powerful that we will stay in things that do not reflect our values so that we can retain community. And what I found in the evangelical church is, I had a pastor meet with me and he said, Trump is crackers. And he meant Trump was crazy, and he said, the guy is off the rails. And I said to him, why don't you get up and say that? And he said, I can't say that. I said, you could, you'll just end up out here with me. Right? But the truth is, we want to belong, right? Whether that's our circle of friends, whether that's in social media, whether it's our neighbors, we want to be involved in deep community. And the problem is that what the Christian right has done, and the MAGA movement has said, you belong with us. We love you. Or it has said, you're under siege and we can protect you. But either way, community is so powerful, and I think the Christian community has leveraged proximity to God. So I don't think evangelicals are going to walk away from that. They're not willing to lose their friendships or their churches in the way that many of us have already lost them. Okay.
Hi.
Hey.
One thing I've learned in my educational pursuits is that we're supposed to learn from history. And what's happening right now, unfortunately, is they're trying to whitewash history and act like the Holocaust didn't happen, slavery didn't happen. If we don't teach it, then it didn't happen. How are we supposed to learn from history and make sure these things don't happen again when education is being...
Yeah, you talk about we have, that is the front lines of the attack right now. It is ours. You know, I regularly go to school board meetings and I travel and I speak at school board meetings, and we all know, I mean, we had someone here tonight who actually said, I care enough that I'm going to run and be involved in that. But it's so difficult because childcare is, our children are so vulnerable, and yet that's the idea that they're weaponizing, the indoctrination of children, right? And yet it's in the name of that they're taking away freedoms for children. And I think on the ground, this is where you're going to do the most work. If you have nothing that you're able to do, then you begin to get involved in your school, because that's the only place that you're going to be able to fight this. Because what the conservative right has done is it's played the long game and the local game. While we have been sort of mesmerized by the big and the distant, by, you know, a lot of people in this room, a lot of people who are from racial diversity, from white to beige, you know, we relaxed when we got a black president because we felt like things were better. But the truth was that the bigots and the hate mongers were being more fueled than ever. And so while we relaxed in how much progress we've made, they began to erase the progress we've made more quickly. So just never be happy, and then you'll always be vigilant. Is that the message? I don't know. Be miserable, but vigilant. Any others? Oh yeah, right down here. Thank you.
Yes, so I'm a public educator, and I was going to ask you if you felt like next year, the next few election cycles, if you felt like public education was going to be attacked, and I think you just answered that. As a public educator, do you have any advice for teachers that are in the classroom that are trying to be strong, trying to continue the fight to educate everybody?
Anything that would come from me would come from a place of both ignorance and arrogance, because I can't imagine the administrative roadblocks you have to being the kind of person that you wish to be as an educator. You know, the only advice I have is to wake up every day and say, okay, I'm going to do the small, the close, the here, the now, the doable that I can do. And that's all any of us can do, right? That's what this story is about. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for teaching.
Right.
Yes, thank you for teaching.
In all of these conversations this evening, it's really kind of focused on the big us versus them, right? And we have, it's very easy, I think, right now to draw a line in the sand and created us versus them.
Yep.
Do you have anything, or can you speak to anything in regards to the idea of this anger, this grief that is inflicted upon you from people on your own side? Like right now, I can see the people on the other side, and while they have hurtful words and things like that, it's always the people who are progressive, who say that they are progressive. Being a queer woman, it's always my straight allies who are the people who say the hurtful things. It's the people who are trying the best, but it's hard to not be angry and grieve when the people who are supposed to be in your fight with you
Yes.
are the people causing you the harm.
Yes, thank you for giving voice to that. The short answer is, we look at whoever we believe they are. That's not reality either, right? We know that every person is a fully formed human being who's very complex, and yet we can look at those people, whoever we believe that they are, and say they're a flawed, failing human being, and so they've got a mess. But the truth is, we are all flawed and failing human beings. So our politics and our religion, they don't exempt us from all the pitfalls of being a human being, and we're all terrified. And so that's probably, I was talking to some people here and last night here in Huntsville, and they're saying, you know what, in Alabama, we're actually struggling within our own tribes of affinity to even reconcile that. So how can we come against some sort of, some calculated threat? And the truth is, we just have to go back to the elemental parts of the relationships that we have around us are the most sacred thing. So we have to invest in those relationships on a deeper level and figure out where are the disconnects. But liberal people fail too. Progressive people are petty and selfish and arrogant and egotistical, and they're afflicted with privilege. So we don't just, I was at a gathering one night, I was gathered in rural Georgia, and it was a gathering of blue people in a really red area, and it was in a Unitarian community. It was like all the heresy and Satanism was right there for the right? And this woman gets up for our Q&A, and she goes, John, we just have to say that right is right and wrong is wrong, and we have right on our side, and we've got to stand up for it and fight. And everyone was cheering, right? And there was just this wave of adulation. And I said, I believe that we have motives that are just, and I believe that our cause is righteous, and I think we're on the right side of history with a lot of these things. But I said, right now across town, there is a bizarro gathering where the opposite of me is up there, and there are people with very different political and theological views, and someone just grabbed the microphone and said, John, right is right and wrong is wrong, and we have right on our side, and on and on and on. No one thinks they're doing it wrong. No one thinks their motives are impure or their manner is unjust, and no one thinks they're doing damage. So we need to have the humility to keep doing this work and realize I could be wrong, or I could be a jerk. I could be the things that I despise in other people. A couple more?
Hey, John, I want to ask you two questions, actually. So the first one is, do you believe that it is ever going to be possible for those of us who are Christians, but on the left side of the political spectrum, to ever coalesce effectively the same way that Christians have on the right? And that's part A. And then part B is, would you ever consider running for public office?
I'm going to answer A and A only. Will Christians on the left ever coalesce? Not in the way Christians on the right have, primarily because we don't want to. All right, what the evangelical right has done is said, we want Jesus and America and power to be the same thing. And we want to gather power, and we want to dominate people into our belief system. And on the progressive side, we simply say, I think Jesus is a beautiful path to walk, and I invite you to walk it. But that is never going to fill a megachurch. It is never going to fuel a massive organization. What it's going to be the yeast in the dough, the individual expressions of personal spirituality, which we're seeing right now. In fact, there are probably a lot of people here who have deep spiritual convictions. So we're having church right now. It just doesn't look, we will take an offering in a moment. I'm not stupid. So I think, David, what we're seeing is we're going to see people who are individually faithful to the teachings of Jesus, and we're going to see them in communities of affinity, but we're never going to see building for an hour on Sunday, and I just don't think it's going to happen. As for me running for office, I know many things, and one of them is my limit, and this would be it. I am not enter politics for the same reason I could never go back to being a local church pastor, because I want to be able to ask anything and say everything, and when you do that, you're going to compromise one of the two, campaign or the church. So I'm probably going to stay out here where I can just keep speaking as authentically as I'm able, but I could be wrong, because I didn't know I would be doing this, for sure. Maybe one or two more?
Hello again, everybody. I'm right here.
Oh, hi.
Once again, I don't want to step on anyone's toes when I ask this question,
Please,
but I do understand we are talking about a lot of progressive thinking, a lot of we should do this and we should do that and we should have this. But on the scale of politics and social justice and social change, how do we begin to create a we in the sense of African American, Asian, Caucasian, and then how do we take that we and find ways of building up to those things? I understand these are great ways of thinking, but how do you get to that? And do you have an actual answer on what we should do to get those things done?
Well, the answer is going to come in the local expression of your community. So, for example, it would be really arrogant for me to walk in and go, hey, Huntsville, this is how you do activism. This is how you do community or social justice. The only thing I know is that it has to be born out of relationship. So there is relationship that has to unite these things. And what I found was the church used to be the place where you get to know someone as a believer and then you do work together in the world. But it's very difficult for us to meet. Think about how difficult it would be for you and to maybe meet 3 people down here and 5 people over here outside of a gathering like this. There is no forum. There are very few forums where you can do that. So for me, it started with an organization in Raleigh called Activate Good, and they were a volunteer hub, and they basically plugged people into volunteer work throughout the community. And I went to just random job sites and signed up, and I started working alongside people who were getting out of their homes and actually caring for their communities. And then I started sharing stories with them, and we decided, oh, we have a lot in common. Let's get some people and let's go do something together. So we built something that was organic and real. And then we did activism, right? So I think relationships are what we lack. We know a lot of people through social media. We have a lot of connections, but we don't have a lot of deep relationships. It's going to have to be relational activism. I think that's where we begin. Okay, yes, last one.
John, I'm not sure this is a question, but you've been through a lot of challenges in your life and more recently, and I know we're tired. I know you must get tired too. I just want to ask you to please take care of yourself. Tell us how you maybe keep from being as tired and disillusioned as we might be.
Oh, well, thank you for saying that. Here's what I decided long ago, Cynthia. I was a pastor in a megachurch, as I said. And what I realized was the hateful people could never say that I was not a fully formed person because of the person I loved, right? As a white, cisgender, heterosexual male pastor, I had what I call the privilege bundle. And so no one could ever dehumanize me the way that other people are dehumanized. So I decided a long time ago that was going to be acceptable collateral damage for me, to face some of that on behalf of people and standing alongside people. The way that this work gets difficult for me personally is I hear those hundreds of stories every week. My inbox gets filled up with people who are like you, who have gone through tremendous trauma and is trying to figure out how to hold all that trauma in a way that honors it. So that's where the fatigue comes, because I don't have I don't get to stay in Huntsville because now you get to do the work. You get to actually decide, this is how we're going to do this here in Huntsville. And then I go back to my house, and then I go back to my local community, and I leave for a while. So the medicinal power of community is something that I would wish I could have experienced more. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to just say a couple more words, and I'll be hang around, and you can spend some time. We'll chat, answer some more questions. There are t-shirts over there that say Alabama on them. I live in North Carolina. If I go back with any of them, they're useless to me, so I just say all of that. Okay, here's what I want to finish with. I said that I was a collector of stories, like a war correspondent, and I always tell people that there are patterns to what people share with me, right? People share with me, whether it's a transgender teenager or a Muslim activist or a migrant father or a racial justice worker, they rarely say, John, as a white, cisgender, heterosexual male pastor, could you be less bold about this? Could you be less loud? They rarely say, could you be less confrontational? What they usually say is, why are so many people of faith, especially white people of faith, so silent right now? Why is the only expression I see of Christianity something predatory, exclusionary, hateful, something that doesn't resemble Jesus? And what I want you to do is be willing to step into the world in a way that you have not done so yet, because it's true, there is an Alabama that's worth fighting for, right? There is an America worth fighting for. There are disparate human beings worth fighting for, and you are the fighters for those things. See, there's no denying that so much of what we feared in 2016 has come to pass, and likely more is going to play out in front of us. It's highly likely that it's going to get much worse before it gets better. Sorry. And yet, as bad as it gets in America, or as bad as it gets in Alabama, we still have our hands and our voices and our gifts and our resources and our platforms and our privilege and our lives to make it less bad. When the sky is falling here in America and elsewhere, people who believe that love will have the last, loudest word still have the responsibility and the ability to walk into these days. And we can still press our shoulders together and steady ourselves and raise our arms to the heavens, and we can hold up the sky together. I didn't come here to tell you how bad things are. You know that. I'm not here to tell you how bad things are. I'm here to remind you of how good you are. Tonight is not about anyone else's inhumanity. It's about your humanity. It's not about someone else's cruelty. It's about your empathy. Someone in one of these gatherings said, John, there are two news feeds in my life. One is big and distant, and it's the news and it's social media, and he said that big and distant news feed is always going to give me the worst and the most conflict and the most hatred because it wants my attention. And he said, if I only pay attention to that news feed, I will become hopeless. He said, but there's another news feed. It's on the ground in the place I live, and in the names and faces and lives and stories of people I know. And he said, if I'm in that place, hope is easy. And this is what I want you to remember, that you have two things. You have proximity and you have agency, right? You have proximity to people in pain, and you have agency to do something about it. You have the small, the close, the here, the now, and the doable. And I don't know what that answer is for you, but you do. So I need you to leave this place and to have your eyes open for where you can show up in the trenches of other people's lives. It doesn't matter who is in the seats of power. It doesn't matter how horrible the legislation that gets passed is. It doesn't matter how compromised the courts are, how predatory the politicians are. Their violence is not the point. Your capacity to love is the point. I had a good friend, and he lived in Santa Rosa, California. And I visited his home, and I saw on the news that His entire home had burned down in the wildfires a couple of years ago, and I called him right away. And he got on the phone with me and he said, John, it was crazy. It was 2 in the morning. He said, we had 15 minutes. We saved what we could. And then it was all gone in a matter of minutes. But he had this phrase. He said, we saved what we could. This is the message, friends. You can't change every political outcome, but you can alter a race if you choose to get involved. You can't make every Christian church face its white supremacy or its homophobia, but you can affect some faith communities that you are connected to. You can't help every transgender teenager see their inherent worth, but I bet you can meet 1 or 2 if you really try. So I just want you to figure out what it is that twists you in your bowels, what it is that disturbs you to the point of sickness, and then with your life, your voice, your resources, your platform, your privilege, and your circle of influence, I want you to go out and save what you can. Thanks for your time tonight. I am blessed to be in your presence.